The most valuable currency isn't the one in your bank account. It's the courage to believe in your vision when no one else will. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The polished granite of the Porter family kitchen island gleamed under the recessed lighting, a perfect backdrop for the champagne flutes my mother Diane was arranging with surgical precision. I watched her from the doorway, my leather portfolio clutched against my chest like armor. The familiar scent of her signature rosemary roast chicken wafted through the air, mingling with the faint chemical tang of whatever new cleaning product she'd discovered at her country club fundraiser. "Olivia, don't just stand there," she called without turning around. "Your brother's promotion party starts in 20 minutes, and the ice bucket still needs filling." I slid my portfolio beneath a stack of mail and moved to help, knowing better than to mention the real reason I'd driven 3 hours from Portland to Seattle on a Wednesday night. This wasn't the time. It never was. From the living room, my father's booming laugh echoed off vaulted ceilings. And then I told the board, if we don't acquire the Thompson account, we might as well hand our clients to Reed & Associates on a silver platter. My older brother Nathan's voice followed, the perfect complementary chord to our father's symphony of corporate success. Dad's mentoring is the only reason I landed the Mitchell portfolio. Senior VP at 33, not 2. Shabby for the Porter name? I busied myself with the ice, letting the familiar weight settle in my stomach. The Porter name. In Seattle's financial district, it commanded respect, opened doors, guaranteed success, provided you chose the right doors. The Porter Financial Group had shepherded the wealth of Seattle's elite for 3 generations. My grandfather had founded it, my father had expanded it, and Nathan was next in line. The succession plan was as fixed as the stars. The doorbell chimed, and soon the house filled with familiar faces. My father's business partners, my mother's social circle, Nathan's college friends, now fellow financial advisors at the firm. I weaved through the crowd, accepting congratulatory hugs meant for my brother, deflecting the inevitable question, "Still working at that little marketing firm in Portland?" Aunt Patricia cornered me by the appetizer spread, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she reached for a stuffed mushroom. "Olivia, darling, I heard about that unfortunate downsizing at your company. Your father mentioned there's an entry-level position opening in client relations at the firm. Perfect timing, don't you think?" "Actually, She's thinking about it," my mother interrupted, appearing at my shoulder with a fresh tray of canapes. Her smile remained fixed, her eyes sending me a silent warning. Not now. Not here. I excused myself and retreated to the kitchen, where I found my younger sister Megan texting furiously at the counter. "Escaping the Nathan worship service too?" she asked without looking up. "Something like that." I reached for a bottle of wine, pouring a generous glass. "How's the art history program?" Megan rolled her eyes. "According to Dad, it's my find yourself phase before I inevitably join the family business." She finally looked up, studying my face. "You look different. What's going on with you?" Before I could answer, Nathan burst into the kitchen, his tailored suit jacket now discarded, his cheeks flushed with success and expensive scotch. "There's my little sisters." He wrapped an arm around each of us. "Hiding from my moment of glory?" "Wouldn't dream of it," I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. "Hey, I've been meaning to ask. Are you okay after the layoffs? Dad said you might finally consider his offer. The marketing department at the firm could use someone to handle the newsletters and social media. Nothing fancy, but it's stable. Stable. The Porter family anthem, the holy grail of achievement." I took a long sip of wine, feeling my portfolio, burning a hole through the mail stack. "Actually, I have news." "There you are." My father appeared in the doorway, followed by an older man with silver hair and a Rolex that probably cost more than my car. "Nathan, come meet Calvin Reed. His daughter's looking for a financial advisor with a personal touch. Right up your alley." Nathan was gone before I could finish my sentence, Megan trailing behind him after a pointed look from our father. The Maya kitchen emptied, leaving me alone with my wine and my unspoken announcement. I pulled my portfolio from beneath the mail, opening it to review the contents I knew by heart. The business plan for Verdant Future, my sustainable marketing agency, focusing exclusively on eco-friendly businesses and environmental nonprofits. 6 months of market research, financial projections, client prospects, and the confirmation email from my landlord about the small office space I'd leased in downtown Portland. All the pieces were in place, all except the courage to tell my family that I'd cashed out my modest 401k to fund a business they would never understand. The party continued around me, celebrating Nathan's ascension in a world I had quietly decided to leave behind. Through the kitchen window, I could see the Seattle skyline glittering against the night sky. Somewhere out there was my tiny Portland apartment, my newly rented office space, and a future that had no space for the Porter name on a grand oak door. I closed the portfolio and rejoined the party, my announcement tucked away for another day. The Portland rain tapped against the windows of my new office space, a persistent reminder of the passage of time. 3 weeks had passed since Nathan's promotion party, and I still hadn't told my family about Verdant Future. The lease had started, the website had launched, and I'd secured 2 initial clients, a local organic bakery and a small sustainable clothing manufacturer, both paying far less than my old marketing salary, but enough to keep the lights on. For now. The space was small, just 600 square feet with concrete floors, exposed brick walls, and windows that faced a community garden across the street. Nothing like the gleaming Porter Financial Group headquarters with its harbor views and marble lobby. But it was mine. "You really committed to the plant theme, huh?" I turned to find Marco standing in the doorway, holding a cardboard tray with 2 coffee cups. My first employee, though employee, felt too corporate for our arrangement. Marco had been an intern at my previous firm, brilliant at digital marketing, but too outspoken about sustainability practices for the corporate culture. When I was laid off, he'd been let go the same day. Too much? I gestured to the potted plants that occupied nearly every surface, transforming the industrial space into something alive. "It's perfect for our brand." He handed me a coffee and surveyed the space. "Did you tell them yet?" I shook my head, knowing he meant my family. Marco had witnessed enough phone calls to understand the complicated dynamics. Nathan's promotion party wasn't the right time, and your dad's birthday was the wrong time, and your mom's garden club event was the wrong occasion. He raised an eyebrow. "There's never going to be a perfect moment to tell them you've abandoned the family legacy to market composting toilets and bamboo toothbrushes. We don't have any composting toilet clients." "Yet," he grinned. "But when Portland's premier poop processors comes calling, we'll be ready." I laughed despite myself, grateful for his lightness. The truth was, every day that passed made the eventual revelation harder to imagine. My parents still thought I was interviewing for marketing positions while freelancing. Each Sunday dinner came with new suggestions for real jobs and thinly veiled offers to speak to my father's contacts. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Megan. I hesitated before answering. "Hey, what's up? Where are you? Your car's not at your apartment." Her voice had the slightly accusatory tone reserved for younger siblings catching their elders in a lie. "I'm working." Not technically, a lie. "Freelancing from a coffee shop again?" I could hear the eye roll in her voice. "Listen, I need to talk to you about something. Meet me at Riverside Park in an hour?" After hanging up, I glanced at Marco. "Cover for me? The Williams proposal is in my shared folder if they call." He nodded, already settling behind his desk. "Go handle the family drama. I'll hold down our mighty empire." An hour later, I found Megan sitting on a bench overlooking the Willamette River, her art portfolio propped beside her. At 24, she was the family wild card, artistic, impulsive, and surprisingly perceptive. "I dropped out," she said as I sat down. No preamble necessary. "The art history program. It's not what I want." "Does Dad know?" She laughed, short and bitter. "What do you think? I told them I was staying with a classmate to work on a project. I've been sleeping on my friend Zoe's couch for 3 days." I watched a boat cut through the river water, creating ripples that expanded outward. "What do you want to do instead?" "Environmental design. I want to create spaces that work with nature instead of against it." She turned to face me. "But that's not why I called you here. I need to know what you're hiding." "What?" "You've been weird for months. Secretive phone calls, vague answers about your job search. That folder you were clutching at Nathan's party like it contained nuclear codes." She narrowed her eyes. "You're up to something, and I want in." The moment stretched, between us, taut with possibility. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. In my sister's face, I saw something I recognized. The same restlessness that had driven me to create Verdant Future. The same hunger for purpose beyond the Porter legacy. "I started a business," I said finally, the words both terrifying and liberating to speak aloud. "A marketing agency focused exclusively on sustainable businesses." Her eyes widened. "You did what? With what money?" "My 401k, and some savings." I winced, knowing how it sounded. "I have an office, a website, even a couple of clients." "Holy shit." She leaned back, processing. "Dad's going to have an aneurysm." "Which is why I haven't told them, not until I can prove it's viable." Megan was quiet for a long moment, then reached for her portfolio. "I've been working on something, brand designs for an eco-conscious design studio I want to start someday." She pulled out several sketches, each featuring variations of a logo with intertwined trees and buildings. "Maybe we could collaborate?" The question hung in the air, fragile and freighted with possibility. In that moment, I saw a different future taking shape. One where I wasn't alone in my deviation from the Porter plan. "Come see my office," I said, standing and offering her my hand. The rain had stopped by the time we reached Verdant Future's modest headquarters. Marco looked up in surprise when I entered with Megan in tow. "Marco, meet my sister Megan, our new design consultant." Marco's eyebrows shot up, but he recovered quickly, extending his hand. "Welcome to the revolution." Megan circled the space, slowly, taking in the plants, the secondhand furniture, the mood board of client concepts pinned to an exposed brick wall. "It's nothing like Porter Financial," she said finally. "That's the idea." She nodded, decision made. "I'm in, but we have to tell them, soon. They're planning some big family trip to the San Juans for next month, and they expect us both there." The familiar weight returned to my stomach. I know. It's time. What I didn't say was that we needed to prove ourselves first. The next client proposal was for Bridge City Renewables, a solar installation company looking to expand their market share. If we landed their business, Verdant Future would have its first major client, and I would have something concrete to show my family besides idealism and office plants. That night, Marco, Megan, and I worked until midnight on the proposal, fueled by takeout Thai food and the particular energy that comes from creative minds finding their alignment. For the first time since leaving the corporate world, I felt the thrill of building something meaningful. As Megan and I locked up, she asked, "What happens when they laugh? Because they will, you know." I thought about my father's dismissal, of anything that prioritized purpose over profit, my mother's horror at financial instability, Nathan's absolute certainty that the family business was the only path worth taking. "Then we'll succeed anyway," I said, more conviction in my voice than I truly felt. "And eventually, they'll stop laughing." What I couldn't have known then was how thoroughly that conviction would be tested, or how quickly the laughter would turn to something else entirely. The Porter family beach house on San Juan Island stood like a sentinel against the horizon, its wide windows reflecting the late August sunset. My hands tightened on the steering wheel as I navigated the final approach, Megan silent beside me. In the back seat, my portfolio now bulged with the signed contract from Bridge City Renewables, 3 more small client agreements, and the first month's modest but real profit and loss statement for Verdant Future. After 3 months of operation, we weren't just surviving, we were growing. Marco had brought on 2 more clients. Megan's designs had won us a local sustainability award, and we'd just hired a part-time content writer. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. "They know something's up," Megan said, breaking the silence. "Mom called me 3 times yesterday asking if we were driving up together." I nodded, stomach churning. "It's now or never. We have the numbers to show them. It's real." "It was always real," she said firmly. "The numbers just make it harder for them to dismiss." The gravel driveway announced our arrival with a crunch beneath the tires. Before we could unload our bags, the front door swung open to reveal our mother, immaculate in white linen pants and a blue cashmere sweater despite the summer heat. "Finally," she exclaimed, embracing us each in turn. "Everyone's already here. Even your Uncle Robert and Aunt Cynthia came up from California. Nathan's grilling on the deck." My parents had positioned this weekend as a family celebration of summer's end. What they didn't know was that Megan and I had decided it would also be the stage for our respective announcements. The house bustled with familiar energy, cousins catching up in the living room, uncles discussing investment strategies by the fireplace, aunts arranging elaborate cheese boards in the kitchen. Through the rear windows, I could see Nathan manning the massive grill on the deck, my father beside him with a tumbler of scotch. "Look who finally made it," my father called as Megan and I stepped onto the deck. He embraced us warmly, the familiar scent of his cologne enveloping me. Traffic from Portland must have been brutal on a Friday. "Actually, we were wrapping up some work," I said, testing the waters. "Freelancing keeping you busy, huh?" Nathan flipped a row of burgers with practiced precision. "Any promising interviews yet?" I exchanged a glance with Megan. "Not exactly." "Well, I've got good news." My father clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Philip Chen at Westlake Marketing owes me a favor. He's looking for a senior account manager. Told him you'd call on Monday." The familiar pressure descended, the weight of expectations, arrangements made without my input, the assumption that I would eventually fall in line with the Porter plan. "Dad, dinner's ready." My mother's voice cut through the moment. "Everyone to the table." The massive oak dining table that dominated the beach house living room had been in the family for generations. My grandfather had supposedly signed the papers establishing Porter Financial on this very surface. Now it was laden with grilled seafood, summer salads, and bottles of the vineyard's reserve wine my father collected. I found myself seated between Uncle Robert and Cousin Teresa, directly across from my parents, with Nathan at my father's right hand, the Porter heir apparent in his traditional place of honor. Megan sat further down the table, surrounded by our younger cousins. Dinner conversation flowed around me in familiar currents: market predictions, client acquisitions, property values. I picked at my salmon, rehearsing words that seemed to evaporate each time I opened my mouth to speak. "So, Olivia," Aunt Cynthia's voice cut through my thoughts. "Richard tells us you've been job hunting since the spring. In this market? That seems unusual for someone with your background." The table quieted, attention shifting to me. My mother's smile tightened at the corners. "Actually," I began. "She's being selective," my mother interjected. "You know Olivia. Always thoughtful about her choices." "Very thoughtful," my father agreed. "And the Westlake position would be perfect. Philip said they're expanding their corporate client list. Blue chip accounts, the kind of connections that build careers." The moment crystallized around me. The assumptions, the plans made on my behalf, the future being shaped without my consent. Across the table, Megan caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. "I'm not taking the Westlake job," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I'm not taking any job interviews, actually." My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "What do you mean?" "I started my own business, a marketing agency called Verdant Future. We work exclusively with sustainable businesses and environmental nonprofits." The words rushed out now, unstoppable. "We've been operational for 3 months. We have 7 clients, including Bridge City Renewables. We're small, but we're growing. And we're already profitable." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Nathan stared at me like I'd announced I was moving to Mars. "You did what?" My father's voice was dangerously quiet. "I started a business," I repeated. "In Portland. Megan works with me as our design consultant." All eyes swiveled to Megan, who straightened her shoulders. "I dropped out of the art history program. I'm pursuing environmental design, specializing in sustainable spaces." "This is a joke, right?" Nathan laughed, looking around the table for confirmation. "Tell me you didn't cash out your retirement to start a, what did you call it? Verdant Future?" His voice dripped with mockery on the name. "It's not a joke." I reached for my portfolio beside my chair. "We have the client contracts, the financials." "Financials?" My father's laugh was sharp. "Let me guess, you're making what, 1/10 of your corporate salary? Throwing away years of career building to hawk bamboo straws and recycled paper?" "We're marketing solar energy and sustainable architecture, among other things," I countered, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "And yes, I took a pay cut to build something meaningful." "Meaningful?" My mother's voice was strained. "Olivia, be reasonable. This sounds like a hobby, not a career." "It's not a hobby. It's a legitimate business with real clients and real growth potential." "Growth potential," Nathan scoffed. "In what universe does marketing for tree huggers have growth potential compared to the family firm? Dad's been holding a place for you for years, and this is how you repay him?" "I never asked him to hold a place for me." The words came out sharper than intended. "I never wanted to join Porter Financial. I've been trying to tell you all that for years, but no one ever listened." Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "Richard, maybe we should hear the girls out. Entrepreneurship is in the Porter blood after all." "Entrepreneurship is building something of value," my father countered. "Not throwing away an education and family connections to chase some Portland eco-fantasy. It's not a fantasy." I pulled the Bridge City contract from my portfolio, sliding it across the table. "This is a 3-year marketing agreement worth over $200,000. We beat out 2 established agencies for this contract." My father glanced at the document, his expression unreadable. "And how much did you withdraw from your retirement to fund this venture? How much debt are you carrying?" The questions were pointed, designed to expose what he surely saw as fiscal irresponsibility. "I invested $60,000 from my 401k. We have no debt. We're cash flow positive as of last month." $60,000? My mother gasped. "Your entire retirement?" "It's an investment in my future, a future I choose." Nathan leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. "And how long before this little experiment fails and you come crawling back to the real world? 6 months? A year?" Something snapped inside me. The real world isn't just corporate boardrooms and investment portfolios, Nathan. Some of us want to build businesses that do more than just make money. "Making money is the point of a business," my father interjected. "Everything else is secondary." "Not to me." I met his gaze across the table. "And not to our clients. Not to the growing market of consumers who want to support companies with values." "Values don't pay mortgages," my mother said softly. "Security does. I'm not asking for your approval, I said, looking around the table, or your understanding. I'm simply informing you of my choice. Our choice, I amended, glancing at Megan. And what happens when this fails? Nathan pressed. When you've burned through your retirement and have nothing to show for it but some wilted office plants and a handful of clients who can barely pay their own bills? Before I could respond, Megan's voice cut through the tension. Then we'll have tried something that matters to us, which is more than I can say for pushing papers at Porter Financial because it's expected. Nathan's face flushed. Easy to criticize when you've never had real responsibility, Megan. Some of us have families to support, legacies to uphold. Maybe some legacies need questioning, she shot back. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I think that's enough dinner conversation. Olivia, we'll discuss this privately tomorrow, when you've had time to reconsider this situation. There's nothing to reconsider, Dad. This is happening. It's already happening. He turned away without responding, moving toward the liquor cabinet with the stiff posture that signaled the end of any potential dialogue. Dinner dispersed into uncomfortable clusters of conversation. I found myself on the deck, staring out at the darkening water of the Puget Sound, when Uncle Robert joined me. You know, he said after a moment of silence, your grandfather started Porter Financial against his father's wishes. The old man wanted him to take over the shipping business, said finance was too risky, too new. I turned to look at him, surprised. This wasn't the family narrative I'd grown up hearing. The first year was rough, nearly went under twice. He smiled at my expression. Not the story Richard tells, I know, but it's true. The point is, entrepreneurship is messy. It's supposed to be. Did my grandfather eventually get his father's support? Uncle Robert laughed. Not really, but he got his respect. And eventually, that was enough. As he walked away, I realized that respect, not approval, was perhaps all I could hope for, and maybe in time even that would be enough. The winter rain pelted against the windows of Verdant Future's new office space, 3 times the size of our original location, with an actual conference room and a small kitchen area. 6 months had passed since the disastrous family dinner, 6 months of minimal contact with my parents and strained holiday gatherings where my business was the elephant in the room. The Smith proposal is ready for review. Tanya, our new account manager, placed a folder on my desk. And the Ecology Northwest campaign launched this morning. Early metrics look promising. I nodded my thanks, still adjusting to the reality of having 5 employees. Bridge City Renewables had referred us to 2 other renewable energy companies, and word was spreading in Portland's sustainability community. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving. Also, there's someone here to see you. Tanya's expression was curious. Says he's your brother. My head snapped up. Nathan, here? She nodded. I put him in the conference room. He's been looking at our client wall for the past 10 minutes like he's decoding hieroglyphics. Nathan in my office. The 2 worlds I'd kept carefully separated were suddenly colliding. I smoothed my shirt, a far cry from the corporate attire of Porter Financial, but professional in Portland's more casual business culture, and made my way to the conference room. My brother stood with his back to the door, studying the wall where we displayed our client work. In his tailored charcoal suit, he looked alien against our reclaimed wood conference table and plant-filled space. Nathan. My voice came out more clipped than intended. What brings you to Portland? He turned, and I was surprised to see not judgment, but something like curiosity in his expression. Meeting with a client nearby. Thought I'd see this place for myself. He gestured around. It's not what I expected. What did you expect? Hippies weaving hemp bracelets while chanting about climate change? His mouth quirked. Something like that. But this is legitimate. He pointed to our client wall. Bridge City is a serious player. So is Urban Sustainability Partners. You're doing real work here. I folded my arms, unsure how to respond to this unexpected assessment. Yes, we are. Dad doesn't know I'm here, he added, as if reading my thoughts. He's still processing. 6 months is a long processing time. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of our father it was startling. He had plans, Liv, for all of us. You throwing away your corporate career for this? I didn't throw anything away. I built something. New? I'm starting to see that. He moved to the window, watching rain cascade down the glass. Porter Financial is expanding its ESG investment division. Sustainable portfolios, green bonds, that sort of thing. Clients are asking for it. The Mao revelation hung in the air between us. Environmental, social, and governance investing was the finance world's nod to sustainability. A growing sector my father had previously dismissed as a passing trend. Is that why you're really here, Nathan? Market research for Dad's new division? He turned back to me, his expression uncharacteristically earnest. Partly, but also, I wanted to see what was important enough for you to walk away from everything. I didn't walk away from everything, just a path that wasn't mine. A knock at the door interrupted us. Megan entered, her arms full of design boards, hair pulled back in a messy bun, paint smudges on her jeans. She stopped short at the sight of our brother. Nathan, what are you doing here? Apparently, market research, I said dryly. Nathan had the grace to look sheepish. The ESG division was my idea, actually. Dad was reluctant until I showed him the market projections. He paused. Your client list would be valuable intel. You want us to help Porter Financial capitalize on sustainability? Megan laughed incredulously. After everyone mocked our eco-fantasy? I want us to stop working at cross purposes, Nathan countered. The market is shifting. Even Dad sees it now. Your expertise in marketing to this demographic could complement our financial services. I studied my brother, trying to discern his true intention. Are you proposing some kind of collaboration? Maybe. A referral arrangement to start. We have clients looking for marketing that speaks to sustainability-minded consumers. You have clients who might benefit from our ESG investment options. The proposal was unexpected enough to leave me momentarily speechless. Megan recovered first. Does this mean you're admitting we were right? She couldn't keep the triumph from her voice. Nathan rolled his eyes. It means I'm acknowledging there's a viable market sector you've positioned yourselves well within. Don't push it, brat. Despite myself, I smiled at the familiar sibling dynamic. I'd need to see a formal proposal and assurances that any clients we refer would receive genuinely sustainable investment options, not greenwashed products. Fair enough. Nathan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. I took the liberty of drafting some preliminary terms. Review it when you have time. As he handed me the folder, our father's voice echoed in my memory. Making money is the point of a business. Everything else is secondary. Was Nathan genuinely interested in sustainability, or just in expanding Porter Financial's market share? Why the change of heart, Nathan? 6 months ago, you were calling this a hobby business doomed to fail. He was quiet for a moment. 2 things. First, your numbers. Uncle Robert mentioned you're projecting $800,000 in revenue this year. At my surprised look, he added, "We still talk business, Liv." And second, he hesitated. I've been watching what's happening with climate change, the Pacific Northwest, fires, the flooding. It's affecting our clients' real estate, their insurance costs. Ignoring sustainability isn't just short-sighted anymore. It's bad business. It wasn't a moral conversion, but it was honest. Nathan would always view the world through a financial lens. Perhaps this was as close to understanding as we would get. I'll review your proposal, I said finally, but I make no promises. He nodded, checking his watch. I should get to my meeting. But, Liv? He paused at the door. For what it's worth, I was wrong about this place. You've built something impressive." After he left, Megan collapsed into a conference chair. Did that just happen? Is Nathan, Porter, golden child and defender of family tradition, actually suggesting we work together? I tapped the folder against my palm, mind racing. It could be an opportunity, or a trap, or both. She grinned. Imagine Dad's face if Porter Financial's sustainable investing division started collaborating with Verdant Future. The thought was both amusing and strange, a bridge between worlds I'd assumed would remain forever separate. That night, I called my parents' house for the first time in months. My mother answered, her voice guarded but hopeful. "Olivia, is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Mom. I saw Nathan today. He mentioned the new ESG division at Porter Financial." "Oh." A pause. "Yes, he's quite passionate about it. Your father is still getting used to the idea. I thought maybe we could talk about a potential business collaboration." The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, my mother said, "Your father's in his study. I'll put you on speaker." As the call transferred, I heard my mother whisper, "It's Olivia. About business." The subtle emphasis on the last word spoke volumes. This wasn't a personal reconciliation, but it was a beginning. "Olivia." My father's voice was neutral. "Nathan mentioned he stopped by your office." "He did. He proposed a referral arrangement between Porter Financial and Verdant Future." "Did he?" My father's tone gave nothing away. "And what did you think of that idea?" I took a deep breath. "I think it has potential, if we can agree on terms that align with our values." Values. He repeated the word, but without the dismissal. That would have colored it 6 months ago. "Nathan says your client list is impressive, that you've carved out a specialized niche." Coming from my father, this qualified as effusive praise. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not quite forgiveness or acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of respect. "We have quarterly financials I can send you," I offered, "if you're interested in seeing our growth projections." A beat of silence. I would be. The word seemed to cost him something. "Your grandfather always said specialization was the key to building client loyalty." It wasn't an apology or an admission that he'd been wrong. It was something more valuable. Acknowledgement of Verdant Future as a legitimate business worthy of professional consideration. "I'll email them tonight," I promised. "And Dad? Our new office has a conference room, if you ever want to see it for yourself." "Perhaps," he said, non-committal but not dismissive, "when I'm next in Portland." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment, staring at the phone. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet. But it was a realignment, the first tentative steps toward a new equilibrium where my choices, while different from the family tradition, might still find space within the Porter legacy. The Seattle skyline sparkled against the night sky, visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Porter Financial's conference room. 3 years had passed since Nathan first walked into my Portland office, 3 years of careful collaboration that had evolved into something none of us could have predicted. The Porter Sustainable Future Fund projected returns are exceptional, my father concluded, clicking to the final slide of his presentation. Combining Verdant Future's market insights with our investment expertise has created something truly unique in the industry. Around the conference table sat the firm's senior partners, major clients, and, most surprisingly, me, as the newly appointed head of Porter Financial's sustainability division. Not an employee, but a partner, maintaining my position as CEO of Verdant Future while guiding the investment strategies of the family business. Questions? My father scanned the room, his silver hair catching the light. At 65, he showed no signs of slowing down, though he had remarkably begun to delegate. The meeting dispersed into mingling, with waiters circulating. The meeting dispersed into mingling, with waiters circulating champagne flutes and sustainable hors d'oeuvres, the latter my insistence for all Porter financial events. I found myself beside the window, watching the ferries cross Elliott Bay, when Nathan joined me. "Not bad for an eco-fantasy," he said, echoing his dismissive words from years ago with a self-deprecating smile. Dad's presentation actually used the word pioneering to describe the fund. Twice. I laughed softly. The Porter Sustainable Future Fund. Still can't believe he agreed to the name. He fought it for weeks, said it sounded too activist. Nathan sipped his champagne. The quarterly returns changed his mind. Nothing converts skeptics like market performance. It was true. The fund had outperformed traditional portfolios for 6 consecutive quarters, attracting both longtime Porter clients and a new generation of wealth more concerned with impact than their parents had been. The collaboration between my marketing, insights, and the firm's financial expertise had created something neither of us could have built alone. Olivia. My mother appeared at my elbow, elegant in a navy dress and pearls. The Ashworths want to discuss their daughter's startup, something about sustainable fashion. I told them you were the person to speak with. 3 years ago, she would have steered such clients toward Nathan or my father without a second thought. Now, she recognized where my expertise added value to the family business. It wasn't the career she'd envisioned for me, but she'd come to respect it. Of course. I squeezed her arm gently before moving across the room to where the Ashworths waited, longtime clients whose holiday cards had decorated my parents' mantle throughout my childhood. Olivia Porter. Mrs. Ashworth embraced me warmly. Your father speaks so highly of your work with sustainable businesses. Our Madison has this clothing line using fabrics made from agricultural waste. Pineapple fibers, if you can imagine. Pinatex, I supplied. It's an innovative material. I'd love to speak with her about it. You know about these things? Mr. Ashworth looked surprised. We thought it was just one of her phases. I smiled, remembering similar dismissals of my own early ideas. The sustainable fashion market grew 27% last year. Major luxury brands are investing heavily in alternative materials. It's far from a phase, Mr. Ashworth. As I spoke with them about market trends and consumer demographics, I caught my father watching from across the room, a curious expression on his face. Pride, perhaps, though he would never say so directly. Later, as the evening wound down, I found him in his office reviewing the presentation notes. He glanced up when I entered, gesturing for me to sit. The Ashworths were impressed, he said. Madison's coming in next week to discuss her business plan. I told them you'd sit in on the meeting. Happy to. I settled into the chair across from his desk, the same chair where, as a child, I'd watched him work with awe, and as a young adult, I'd felt the crushing weight of expectations I couldn't meet. Now it felt like neutral territory. I've been thinking, he said, setting aside his notes. The Portland office is performing well, better than projected. The Portland office, Porter Financial's first satellite location, focused exclusively on sustainable investing, with half the staff coming from Verdant Future. My proposal, implemented 18 months ago after careful negotiation. The team is solid. Marco's financial background is more extensive than I initially gave him credit for. Coming from my father, this was high praise. Marco, my first employee, now headed the Portland office's research division, his environmental knowledge proving invaluable in vetting potential investments. We're considering Vancouver next, British Columbia, not Washington. The Canadian market is ripe for this approach. He looked at me directly. I'd like your input on the expansion strategy. The words hung between us. Not quite an apology for dismissing my business acumen 3 years ago, but an acknowledgement that I had earned a seat at the table through merit rather than birthright. I'd be happy to review the plans. I paused, then added, Megan's design firm did exceptional work on the Portland office space. The living wall installation has been featured in 3 design magazines. My father nodded slowly. Your mother mentioned it. The sustainable architecture focus is distinctive. Another careful acknowledgement. Megan had eventually returned to school, completing a degree in environmental design before launching her own firm specializing in biophilic spaces. Her rebellion had been quieter than mine, but no less significant. The Vancouver location should reflect the local ecosystem, I suggested. Megan's been researching Pacific Northwest native plantings for commercial spaces, brings down heating costs and improves air quality. Have her send a proposal. He didn't quite meet my eyes, still finding it difficult to admit that both his daughters had found success outside the paths he'd laid out. I will. I stood to leave, then hesitated. Dad, the Sustainable Future Fund. It's good work, important work. He was silent for a moment. It's profitable work. That's what matters. Is it? I challenged gently. Last week you spent 3 hours convincing the Wentworths to divest from that plastics manufacturer, even though the fees would have been substantial. A flush crept up his neck. Their granddaughter has become quite the climate activist. Family harmony has tangible value. I didn't push further. We both knew it was more than that. That somewhere along the way, my father had begun to see beyond quarterly returns to longer horizons. That the legacy he now envisioned had evolved from pure profit to something more complex. Your grandfather would have found all this quite surprising, he said finally, gesturing vaguely to encompass the sustainable fund. My role, the change direction of the family business. Would he? I leaned against the doorframe. Uncle Robert told me Grandpa started Porter Financial against his own father's wishes, that he wanted to do something different than the family shipping business. My father looked startled. Robert told you that? The night of the San Juan dinner, when everyone else was processing. He chuckled despite himself. Processing. That's one way to put it. He was quiet for a moment, then added, My father never told me that story. Maybe he thought it wasn't relevant, that you were already following the path he'd created. Perhaps. He straightened some papers on his desk, a habitual gesture when conversations veered toward the personal. The quarterly board meeting is next Thursday. I'll need your sustainability forecasts by Monday. And just like that, we were back to business, the safe territory where we could navigate our still evolving relationship. But as I walked away, I caught his reflection in the window glass, watching me with an expression I rarely saw. Uncertainty. The next morning, I flew back to Portland, where Verdant Future now occupied an entire floor of a renovated warehouse in the Pearl District. The business had grown to 28 employees, with dedicated departments for digital marketing, content creation, and sustainability consulting. Bridge City Renewables was still a client, along with dozens of others ranging from small local businesses to national brands developing their sustainability narratives. Marco met me at the elevator, tablet in hand. How was the Seattle presentation? Successful. The fund is outperforming projections. I scanned the open office space, noting the energy of a Monday morning in full swing. Any fires while I was gone? Just the usual. The Horizon Foods campaign needs approval by noon, and the Lewis pitch is scheduled for Wednesday. Oh, and you got another acquisition offer. He handed me a folder. California firm, bigger than the last one, 8 figures. I tucked the folder under my arm without opening it. The offers had started about a year ago. Larger agencies and consulting firms looking to acquire our expertise and client relationships. I'd rejected them all, though each came with a higher price tag than the last. Also, Marco continued as we walked toward my office. Your sister called, twice. Something about an unexpected development. She sounded excited. I found Megan waiting in my office, perched on the edge of my desk, practically vibrating with energy. At 27, she'd grown into a confident professional, her design firm gaining recognition for innovative, sustainable spaces. The untamed, creative streak that our parents had once dismissed as impractical had become her greatest asset. "Finally!" She jumped up when I entered. "I've been waiting for hours." I was in Seattle, board stuff. I set down my bag. "What's the urgent development?" She thrust her tablet toward me, displaying an email with a government seal. "The Portland Municipal Building renovation contract. We got it. My firm is going to redesign the entire 3 floors using passive heating, living systems, and reclaimed materials." "Megan, that's incredible." I hugged her tightly. Municipal contracts were notoriously difficult to secure, especially for younger firms. "Your first major public project." "It gets better." She could barely contain herself. "I'm partnering with Urban Woodworks for the reclaimed timber elements. Remember Thomas Blackwell?" The name took a moment to register. Dad's college roommate's son, the one who left his father's development company to start that sustainable forestry program? She nodded eagerly. "The very one. He's been salvaging urban trees and historic timbers for years. Now he has this wood reclamation workshop employing formerly incarcerated people. The social impact metrics are as impressive as the environmental ones. That's perfect for the municipal contract. The city council will love the community angle." I studied her flushed face more carefully. "And I'm guessing you rather like Thomas himself?" She blushed deeply. "We had coffee to discuss the proposal and ended up talking for 4 hours. He's not what I expected from a Blackwell." I laughed. The Blackwells were cut from similar cloth as the Porters: old money, traditional values, deeply established in Seattle's business community. The elder Blackwell had been vocally disappointed when Thomas abandoned commercial development for sustainable forestry. "Does Dad know you're working with him?" "Not yet. I thought you might help with that conversation since you've become so skilled at translating between dad speak and sustainability speak." Her eyes danced with mischief. "Maybe mention it at the next family dinner, after he's had his second scotch but before dessert?" I shook my head, amused. "You're an adult running a successful business. You don't need my help announcing a professional collaboration." "It's not just professional anymore." She bit her lip. "Thomas is coming to Sunday dinner next week, as my guest." "Oh." The implications settled. This wasn't just a business partnership, but potentially the beginning of something more personal. "That's significant." "I know. But after everything, you blazing the trail out of the Porter plan, me following, the business successes we've both had, I think they'll be more open than they would have been 3 years ago." She straightened her shoulders. "Besides, Thomas might be a Blackwell, but he's as much a family disappointment as we were. We have that in common." "Were," I emphasized. Past tense. Neither of us is considered a disappointment anymore. Unconventional, maybe, but not disappointments. She smiled, tension easing from her face. "True, though I'm still waiting for Mom to stop introducing me as her artistic daughter, like it's a developmental condition." We laughed together, the shared understanding of family dynamics that had shaped us both. After Megan left, I finally opened the acquisition offer Marco had handed me. The California firm was offering $10 million for Verdant Future, a valuation that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago when I was operating from a tiny office with secondhand furniture and more plants than clients. The offer letter emphasized how little would change. I would remain as CEO, the Portland office would continue operations, the company name and mission would stay intact. Just with the backing of a larger corporate entity, greater resources, wider reach. $10 million, enough to pay back my retirement fund many times over, enough to secure financial independence for life. The kind of exit strategy most entrepreneurs dream about. I set the letter aside, unable to imagine selling the business I'd built from nothing. Not because it wouldn't be sensible, The offer was more than fair, but because Verdant Future had become more than just a company to me. It was tangible proof that I'd been right to trust my instincts, to risk financial security for purpose, to believe that business could align with values beyond profit. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Vancouver projections look solid. Board impressed with Portland model. Your input on team structure appreciated. The message was typical of our new communication style. Professional, focused on business, sparing with direct praise but acknowledging my contribution. 3 years ago, I would have craved a more emotional connection. Now, I recognize this as his form of respect. I texted back, glad to hear it. We'll send staffing recommendations tomorrow. Megan has secured the Portland Municipal Building contract. His response came quickly. Tell her congratulations. Your mother very proud. Sustainable design increasing in market value. I smiled at the characteristic mix of personal pride and business assessment. Some things hadn't changed. That evening, I met Kate for dinner at our favorite farm-to-table restaurant overlooking the Willamette River. We had been dating for almost a year, long enough that she understood the complicated dynamics of the Porter family and my relationship with the family business. So, she said after I finished recounting the Seattle presentation, the great Richard Porter now proudly presents the Sustainable Future Fund to his most conservative clients. Never thought I'd see the day. I twirled pasta on my fork, considering. He's adaptable, always has been. Once he saw the market potential, he committed fully. It's not just market potential and you know it. Kate reached for her wine. Your father has changed. You all have. Kate had a talent for cutting through pretense, one of the things I loved about her. As the head of a nonprofit focused on river conservation, she brought a perspective outside the Porter financial worldview that had proved invaluable both personally and professionally. Megan's bringing Thomas Blackwell to family dinner next week, I said, changing the subject slightly. As a date, not just a business associate. Kate's eyebrows rose. Bold move. Though after you brought me to Christmas, the precedent for non-Porter-approved partners is established. I laughed, remembering my mother's barely concealed shock when I arrived with Kate for the holiday gathering. Not because Kate was a woman. My sexuality had been acknowledged, if not discussed in detail years ago. But because she worked in non-profit, conservation rather than a suitably prestigious profession. By the third glass of wine, Mom was asking her about river pollutants. Progress, of a sort. Your mother is trying. They both are. Kate's expression grew more serious. Which brings me to something I've been wanting to discuss. The Willamette Restoration Project is looking for corporate sponsors for the Habitat Recovery Initiative. It's a 3-year commitment, mid-6 figures. Would Porter Financial be interested? The question hovered between us. Part professional inquiry, part test of how far my family's evolution had truly progressed. 3 years ago, Porter Financial's charitable giving had been limited to safe, prestigious causes. Symphony orchestras, art museums, hospital wings. Environmental restoration would have been dismissed as too political, too activist. Send me the proposal, I said. I think they might be ready, especially if we can arrange some good publicity around it. Kate rolled, her eyes good-naturedly. Of course, the Porter way, do good, but make sure it's good business too. Evolution happens in stages, I reminded her. From pure profit to profit with purpose is still progress. Later that night, back in my apartment, I found myself scrolling through photos on my phone, images spanning the 3 years since that fateful family dinner. Verdant Future's first office, the team celebration when we landed Bridge City, the ribbon cutting at Porter Financial's Portland location, my parents' awkward but genuine smiles at last year's Christmas dinner with Kate, beside me. A text message interrupted my nostalgia. Megan, sending a photo of her newest design project, a sustainable housing development using innovative materials and energy systems. Thomas is helping source the reclaimed timber. Dad's going to flip. When he hears about the projected ROI. I smiled, imagining my father's reaction to learning that sustainable design could deliver returns that matched or exceeded traditional construction. Another small shift in his understanding of what constituted good business. A new text arrived, this one from Nathan. Vancouver location secured. Board wants your Portland team to train new hires on sustainability metrics. Also, Emily asking about internship at Verdant Future next summer. Thoughts? Emily, Nathan's 16-year-old daughter, who had recently joined her high school's environmental club and begun questioning her father about Porter Financial's investment policies. The next generation already pushing boundaries further than we had. Tell Emily to apply through the regular channels, I replied. No special treatment, but we'd be glad to have her if she's qualified. And is interested in more than just making. Dad nervous. She'll be thrilled, came the response, and terrified. Good combination for growth. Growth. That had become the unexpected theme of these past 3 years. Not just business growth, though both Verdant Future and Porter Financial's sustainability division had certainly experienced that, but personal and familial growth. The painful confrontation at the San Juan dinner had ultimately carved space for new possibilities, new connections, new definitions of success within the Porter legacy. I opened the acquisition offer once more, studying the 8-figure sum. A validation of what I'd built, certainly. But also, I realized, unnecessary. I didn't need external validation anymore. Not from corporate acquirers, not from industry. Awards, not even finally, from my father. The success of Verdant Future spoke for itself, measured not just in revenue, but in impact. Clients transitioning to sustainable practices, competitors following our lead, the Porter name becoming associated with forward-thinking investment rather than just traditional wealth management. I drafted a polite rejection email to the California firm, explaining that Verdant Future would remain independent for the foreseeable future. Some might call it foolish to walk away from such an offer, just as some had called it foolish to start the business in the first place. But I had learned to trust my instincts, to value purpose alongside profit, to measure success by standards beyond balance sheets. 3 years ago, my family had laughed when I said I'd start my own business. Now they weren't just asking for loans, they were asking for partnership, for guidance, for a share in the vision I'd held when no one else could see it. The most valuable return on my investment wasn't financial at all, but the transformation of the Porter legacy into something I could proudly claim as my own. The Vancouver office would open in 3 months. Megan would bring Thomas to Sunday dinner next week. Kate and I were discussing moving in together. Emily wanted an internship at the company her grandfather had once dismissed as an eco-fantasy. Life continued to unfold in unexpected directions, proving that the most powerful legacy wasn't the one I'd inherited, but the one I'd dared to create. Outside my window, Portland's lights reflected on the Willamette River, the city I'd chosen. Over Seattle, the path I'd forged instead of followed. Tomorrow would bring new client meetings, strategy sessions for the Vancouver office, perhaps another acquisition offer to decline. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment to acknowledge how far we'd all come from that painful confrontation 3 years ago. My father had been right about one thing. Entrepreneurship was about building something of value. Where we differed, where we still sometimes differed, was in how we defined value itself. But we were learning to speak each other's languages, to see beyond our differences to the shared Porter determination that had driven us all, albeit in different directions. I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, thinking of Megan's excited face as she'd shared her municipal contract news, of my father's carefully professional text acknowledging the value of my input, of Nathan's willingness to send his daughter to learn from the business he'd once mocked. Small victories, accumulating over time into something that looked remarkably like acceptance. Not the acceptance I'd once craved, approval for following the prescribed Porter path, but something more meaningful, respect for creating a new path entirely. one that others were now choosing to follow. The rain began again, tapping gently against my windows, Portland's constant companion. In the morning, I would return to Verdant Future's offices, gather my team, and continue building the business that had changed not just my life, but my family's understanding of what success could look like. For now, though, I simply listened to the rain and appreciated how far we'd all come and how much further we might yet go. The Porter legacy was evolving, one sustainable business decision at a time. And I was no longer fighting against it, but helping to reshape it into something that future generations might find worth preserving. Not because it was expected, but because it was right. 4 years had passed since that pivotal dinner at the San Juan Beach House. 4 years of building Verdant Future into a recognized leader in sustainable marketing, of gradually transforming Porter Financial's investment approach, and of healing family wounds that had once seemed permanent. The boardroom of Verdant Future's Portland headquarters hummed with anticipation as I reviewed my notes for the upcoming presentation. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the living wall of native ferns and moss that Megan had designed as the focal point of our conference space. Outside, the Willamette River glittered beneath an unusually clear February sky. "They're here," Marco announced, poking his head through the doorway. Now my chief operations officer, he had traded his casual Portland attire for a tailored suit, a concession to today's visitors, though he'd insisted on keeping his signature sustainable wool tie. I smoothed my blazer and straightened my shoulders as the door opened to admit my father and brother, both impeccably dressed in the understated way of men accustomed to wealth. Behind them followed a tall woman with sharp eyes and a sharper suit, Elaine Watanabe, CEO of Pacific Northwest Green Energy Coalition, the potential client whose business could transform both Verdant Future and Porter Financial's sustainable initiatives. Olivia. My father extended his hand, the formality betrayed by the slight softening around his eyes. Traffic from the airport was lighter than expected. Portland efficiency. I smiled, gesturing toward the conference table. I believe you know everyone except Elaine. Introductions were made as my team filed in. Marco, our head of digital strategy, Priya, and our newest addition, a sustainability metrics specialist headhunted from a major consulting firm. My father seated himself at my right, a physical representation of how our professional relationship had evolved. No longer dismissive of my eco-fantasy, he had become a cautious ally in bridging traditional finance with sustainability. "Before we begin," Elaine said, setting her tablet on the table, "I want to be clear about our expectations. PNGEC represents 17 renewable energy companies across 3 states. We're looking for a comprehensive approach, marketing that positions us effectively while investment strategies that accelerate our growth. This partnership would be unprecedented in scope, which is precisely why the Porter-Verdant collaboration is uniquely positioned to deliver," I began, launching into the presentation we had spent weeks perfecting. As I spoke, I caught my father watching me with an expression I rarely saw, something that might have been pride, though he would never label it as such. The Richard Porter of 4 years ago would have dominated such a meeting, regardless of whose office we occupied. Today, he listened intently, occasionally adding financial context, but otherwise allowing me to lead. The sustainable energy sector isn't just growing, it's transforming, I continued, pulling up our market analysis. Public perception has shifted from viewing renewable energy as an alternative to seeing it as an inevitability. Our approach leverages that shift while addressing the remaining barriers to widespread adoption. Nathan leaned forward, adding, "Porter Financial's Sustainable Investment Fund has outperformed traditional portfolios by 18% over the past 3 years. We've developed specialized instruments for renewable infrastructure that reduce initial capital burdens while maximizing long-term returns." Elaine's eyes narrowed with interest. "And this collaboration between your firms, it functions seamlessly despite the family dynamics?" The question hung in the air, more pointed than she perhaps realized. 4 years ago, it would have created unbearable tension. Today, I met my father's gaze briefly before responding. The Porter-Verdant collaboration works precisely because of our family connections, not despite them, I said carefully. We bring different perspectives but shared values to the table. The tension between traditional financial metrics and sustainability goals creates a more robust approach than either would achieve alone. My father cleared his throat. What my daughter means is that we've learned to value different forms of expertise. Porter Financial brings 8 decades of investment acumen, while Verdant Future contributes unparalleled insight into the sustainable marketplace. Together, we offer what neither could independently. The acknowledgement, public, professional, and genuine, sent a quiet ripple of surprise through the room. Even Nathan glanced up from his notes, momentarily startled by our father's candor. The meeting continued for another hour, diving deeper into strategies and metrics. By the time Elaine stood to leave, her initial skepticism had transformed into cautious enthusiasm. "I'll bring this to our board next week," she said, gathering her materials. "Your approach is intriguing, particularly the integration of financial and marketing strategies. Few firms truly understand both worlds." After our visitors departed, Marco turned to me with raised eyebrows. Did Richard Porter just admit that Verdant Future brings something valuable to the table that Porter Financial can't provide on its own? Should we check for flying pigs? I laughed, though the moment had affected me more deeply than I wanted to admit. 4 years of proven results will eventually convince even the most stubborn skeptics. "It's more than that," Marco said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "He respects you, not just the business you've built, but your vision. That's a long way from laughing at your Portland eco-fantasy." The observation followed me through the remainder of the day, surfacing again that evening as I prepared for the monthly Porter family dinner. These gatherings had evolved from tense obligations to something approaching genuine connection, though old patterns occasionally resurfaced when guards dropped. My apartment in Portland's Pearl District reflected the changes in my life over the past 4 years. No longer the sparse temporary space of someone expecting failure, but the thoughtfully designed home of a woman confident in her path. Sustainable materials blended with family heirlooms, including my grandfather's desk, which now served as my home workspace. My mother had sent it last year, a gesture whose significance wasn't lost on me. I checked my appearance once more before heading out, professional yet comfortable in a way that bridged the Portland-Seattle divide. These small navigations between worlds had become second nature, no longer requiring conscious thought. The restaurant my mother had selected for tonight's dinner was new, a farm-to-table establishment whose chef had recently relocated from San Francisco to showcase Pacific Northwest ingredients. Kate would meet us there, having driven up from a conservation conference in Salem. Megan and Thomas would attend as well, their relationship having weathered initial family skepticism to become something serious. Even Nathan's wife, Jennifer, once the epitome of the Porter corporate spouse, had begun asking thoughtful questions about sustainability that went beyond polite interest. I arrived to find my father already seated at the private dining room's table, nursing a glass of scotch while reviewing something on his phone. He stood when I entered, a courtesy he would have extended to any business associate, but which now carried undercurrents of genuine welcome. "The P&J presentation was impressive," he said without preamble. "Elaine called me afterward. She's recommending the partnership to her board." "That's excellent news." I accepted the glass of wine the server offered. "If P&G signs, it opens doors to similar coalitions in California and Colorado." He nodded, returning to his seat. "I've been reviewing the Vancouver expansion numbers. Your team's integration with our analytics department has significantly improved the projection models." The conversation hovered in the comfortable territory of business, still the easiest common ground between us, though no longer the only one. We were discussing market forecasts when my mother arrived with Megan and Thomas in tow, their entrance shifting the atmosphere from professional to personal. "Olivia!" My mother embraced me with genuine warmth, her perfume familiar and comforting. "How was your presentation? Your father mentioned it was today." 4 years ago, she would have asked about job interviews or when I planned to settle into something stable. The evolution in her questions reflected her own journey toward accepting my unconventional path. It went well. We're cautiously optimistic. I turned to embrace Megan, noting the subtle tension in her shoulders. "Everything okay?" "Fine," she responded too quickly, exchanging a loaded glance with Thomas. Before I could probe further, Kate arrived, apologizing for her lateness. The salmon habitat presentation ran long. Politicians asking questions always extends the timeline. Introductions and greetings filled the next few minutes as we settled around the table. Nathan and Jennifer arrived last, their teenage daughter Emily in tow, a surprise addition to what was usually an adults-only gathering. Emily insisted on joining us, Jennifer explained with a mix of exasperation and pride. She's working on a school project about family businesses and sustainability. Emily, 16 and vibrant with the particular intensity of environmentally conscious youth, pulled out a notebook. "I'm interviewing family members about the evolution of Porter, financial's approach to sustainability. It's for my economics class." Nathan rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Translation? She's documenting the family drama for academic credit. "It's not drama, Dad. It's organizational change management." Emily turned to me. "Aunt Olivia, can I interview you first? Your perspective as the change agent who disrupted the family business model is central to my thesis." The table erupted in laughter. Even my father chuckled into his scotch. 4 years ago, such a characterization would have created instant tension. Today, it merely reflected a truth we had all come to accept. "Change agent sounds so intentional," I commented, accepting a menu from the server. "I just wanted to build something that aligned with my values, which forced everyone else to reevaluate their values," Emily pressed, pen poised above her notebook. "Especially Grandpa. Right, Grandpa?" My father set down his glass, regarding his granddaughter with a mixture of exasperation and reluctant admiration. "Your aunt didn't force anything. She demonstrated a viable alternative approach that the market eventually validated." "So it was the market that changed your mind, not Aunt Olivia's arguments?" Emily's question cut to the heart of a fundamental truth. An uncomfortable silence descended on the table. Even after 4 years of gradual reconciliation, certain realities remained difficult to articulate. To everyone's surprise, it was Thomas who broke the silence. "In my experience, genuine change requires both financial validation and personal connection. The Blackwell Sustainable Forestry Initiative wouldn't have changed my father's perspective if it hadn't been profitable, but he wouldn't have looked past the initial investment risk if I hadn't been his son." "Exactly." My father seized on the analogy with visible relief. Porter Financial adapted to market shifts that Olivia identified earlier than the rest of us. The family connection meant we paid attention when we might otherwise have dismissed the opportunity. Emily scribbled furiously. "So nepotism can occasionally serve environmental progress. Interesting." "I wouldn't call it nepotism," my mother interjected, clearly uncomfortable with the term. "Family businesses naturally evolve with each generation. Your grandfather expanded into new investment sectors that his father never considered. But not against active resistance," I pointed out gently. "The difference is that my path initially faced significant skepticism from within the family." "Ridicule," Megan corrected, then flushed as all eyes turned to her. "Let's be honest. We're here celebrating collaboration now, but 4 years ago you all laughed at Olivia's business plan. You told her she was throwing away her career and her financial security on a hobby." The blunt assessment hung in the air, challenging the carefully constructed narrative of gradual evolution we had collectively developed. Even I, who had lived through the painful dismissal, had grown comfortable with the softened version of history. My father studied his Scotch for a long moment before responding. "You're right, Megan. We did worse than dismiss Olivia's vision. We mocked it. I mocked it." He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. It was short-sighted and, frankly, arrogant. The admission stunned the table into silence. Richard Porter rarely acknowledged mistakes, particularly in public settings. Emily's pen hovered motionless above her notebook, capturing a family milestone no one had anticipated. "To be fair," I said finally, uncomfortable with the spotlight his confession had created, Verdant Future's success wasn't guaranteed. The investment was high risk by any standard financial metric. "The financials weren't the point," my father countered, surprising me again. "You believed in building something meaningful, regardless of the risk." I dismissed that belief as naive, idealism rather than recognizing it as entrepreneurial vision. The same quality that led my father to start Porter Financial 70 years ago. The parallel to my grandfather, explicitly drawn by my father himself, elevated my choice from family, rebellion to legacy continuation. It was a narrative reframing that even professional marketing couldn't have accomplished more effectively. "So," Emily broke the weighted silence, "would you say Porter Financial's sustainability focus represents an expansion of the family's definition of value rather than a departure from its fundamentals?" My father laughed suddenly, the tension dissolving. "Are you certain you're only 16? That question belongs in a graduate-level business ethics course." As dinner progressed, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Kate's conservation, work, Thomas's recent timber reclamation project, Nathan's daughter's college applications. Yet the moment of honest reckoning lingered beneath the surface, creating space for another revelation. During dessert, Megan set down her fork with deliberate care and reached for Thomas's hand. "Since we're all together, we have an announcement." She took a deep breath. "Thomas and I are getting married, and we're launching a joint venture, Blackwell Porter Sustainable Spaces, combining his material sourcing with my design approach." The news rippled through the table, generating immediate congratulations. My mother's eyes glistened as she embraced, first Megan, then Thomas. Even my father seemed genuinely pleased, shaking Thomas's hand firmly. "We're also," Megan continued, her voice strengthening, "establishing a scholarship foundation for students pursuing sustainable design and construction careers. We've already secured commitments from 4 other firms, including Porter Financial's investment support, if you're still offering it, Dad." My father nodded, the gesture simple but significant. "Of course. We discussed initial funding of $250,000, if I recall correctly. Though with the wedding expenses, perhaps we should revisit the timeline." "No need," Thomas interjected. "We're planning a small ceremony. Better to invest the money in the foundation than in one elaborate day." Jennifer leaned forward. "Where will the business be headquartered? Seattle or Portland?" "Actually," Megan exchanged a glance with Thomas, "we're considering Vancouver. The British Columbia market is particularly receptive to sustainable building practices, and with Porter Financial opening an office there, the timing seems ideal." Vancouver. The satellite office that had grown from my proposal into a significant expansion of Porter Financial's sustainability focus. The location where both family businesses would now converge in yet another collaborative venture. As I watched my sister describe her vision, I recognized her expression, the same determined hope I had felt when launching Verdant Future, the belief in building something meaningful despite the risks. But unlike my journey, Megan's venture began with family support rather than skepticism. "You know," Kate murmured beside me, 4 years ago they would have tried to talk her out of it, pushed her towards something sensible in the family business. Times change, people change. I squeezed her hand beneath the table. "People change when other people show them a different way," she corrected. "You created this opening." After dinner, as we gathered in the restaurant foyer preparing to depart, my father drew me aside. The evening's revelations seemed to have shifted something in him, loosening the careful professional distance he typically maintained even in family settings. "Your grandfather would have admired what you've built," he said quietly. "Not just the business itself, but the way you've stayed true to your principles despite opposition." That was his approach too, though in a different era with different challenges. "I wish I had known him better," I admitted. The real him, not just the Porter financial founding legend. He was complicated, visionary in some ways, conventional in others. My father hesitated. "Like me, I suppose. Too slow to recognize innovation that doesn't follow familiar patterns." "But you did recognize it eventually. That's what matters." He studied me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "When you first announced your business plan, I saw it only as a rejection of the family legacy. It took me too long to understand that you were actually extending that legacy in ways I hadn't imagined." The acknowledgement, so long desired, no longer desperately needed, but still profoundly meaningful, settled between us like a bridge connecting previously separate territories. "The Porter Sustainable Future Fund is outperforming every other division," I reminded him. "Sometimes rejection is just renovation in disguise." He smiled at the metaphor. "Your sister's design influence is showing." Then, more seriously, "The PNGEC contract will transform both our businesses if it comes through. A template for future collaborations that neither of us could secure independently." "Full circle," I observed. "From laughing at my business plan to banking on its approach." "Not quite full circle," he corrected. "That would imply we've ended up where we started. We're somewhere new entirely, building something neither of us envisioned 4 years ago." As we rejoined the others, I found myself reflecting on his words. We had indeed created something new, not just successful businesses, but a reimagined family dynamic that allowed for different visions while maintaining connection. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward, but its very difficulty had forced growth that comfort would never have demanded. Outside the restaurant, Kate slipped her hand into mine as we watched the family disperse into the clear Portland night. Megan and Thomas departed first, followed by Nathan's family, with Emily still peppering her grandfather with questions for her project. My mother embraced me one last time, whispering, "I'm so proud of both my daughters," before joining my father in their waiting car. "Successful evening," Kate observed as they drove away. "Your father's admission about dismissing your business was unexpected." Emily's question caught him off guard. Sometimes the youngest generation cuts through the pretense the rest of us maintain. "Speaking of the younger generation," Kate said casually, "I've been meaning to ask, have you given any more thought to our conversation about starting a family?" The question stirred both excitement and uncertainty. Another identity evolution was on the horizon, from entrepreneur and daughter to potential parent, with all the challenges that would entail. "I have," I admitted. "And I'm starting to think we could create our own unconventional approach to that too, just like everything else." Kate smiled, understanding the deeper implications. "The Porter legacy continues to evolve?" As we walked toward our car, the Portland skyline glittered against the night sky, so different from Seattle's corporate towers but beautiful in its own right. Like the businesses we had built, the relationships we had transformed, and the future we continued to shape. Evolution is the only constant, I reflected. 4 years ago, my family laughed when I said I'd start my own business. Now they're not just asking for loans, they're building new ventures inspired by the very approach they once dismissed. The irony wasn't bitter, but sweet, a testament to how far we had all traveled from that confrontational dinner 4 years ago. The journey had transformed not just our professional lives, but our understanding of family itself. Not as a fixed inheritance, but as a living system, capable of growth, adaptation, and renewal. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The PNGC, Contract to finalize, Megan's wedding to plan, Kate's questions about family to consider. But tonight, walking hand in hand beneath Portland's clear winter sky, I felt the quiet satisfaction of having created something that would outlast any business success. A new definition of the Porter legacy, expansive enough to embrace different dreams while remaining unquestionably, fundamentally connected. 5 years into building Verdant Future, I found myself standing on a stage I never expected to occupy. The Pacific Northwest Business Leadership Awards were being held in the grand ballroom of Seattle's most prestigious hotel, with over 500 regional executives and entrepreneurs in attendance. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was the same venue where my father had received the Lifetime Achievement Award a decade earlier, where Nathan had been celebrated as Rising Star in Finance during my first year of college. Now it was my name being called, my accomplishments being listed by the president of the Regional Chamber of Commerce. For pioneering integration of sustainability and profitability, for demonstrating that purpose-driven business can outperform traditional models, and for transforming the regional business landscape. The Entrepreneur of the Year award goes to Olivia Porter, founder and CEO of Verdant Future. The applause washed over me as I approached the podium, aware of my family watching from the front table. My parents, Nathan and Jennifer, Megan and Thomas, even Emily, who had insisted on attending despite having a final exam the following morning. Kate sat beside them, her proud smile visible even from the stage. I placed my prepared remarks on the lectern, but found myself setting them aside. This moment called for something more authentic than the carefully crafted speech I'd rehearsed. 5 years ago, I began, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. I withdrew my retirement savings to start a marketing agency focused exclusively on sustainable businesses. Many people, including some in this room, thought it was professional suicide, a naive idealist throwing away a promising career on an environmental hobby. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. The story had become something of a legend in Northwest business circles, particularly after the Porter Sustainable Future Fund had outperformed traditional investments for 16 consecutive quarters. What those skeptics missed was that purpose and profit aren't opposing forces. They're complementary when aligned properly. Verdant Future didn't succeed despite our environmental focus. We succeeded because of it. We recognized a market shift before it became mainstream, built expertise in an emerging sector, and created value that traditional agencies couldn't offer. I paused, scanning the faces before me. So many who had dismissed my business model were now implementing sustainability initiatives in their own companies, claiming they'd always seen the potential. This award is meaningful not because it validates me personally, but because it signals a fundamental shift in how we define business success in this region. 5 years ago, sustainability was considered a cost center. Today, it's recognized as a competitive advantage and a driver of innovation. My gaze settled on my father, sitting straight-backed at the front table. His expression was difficult to read, a complex mixture of pride and something that might have been regret. I want to acknowledge my family's role in this journey. The Porter name has long been associated with financial success in this region, though previously in more traditional sectors. A knowing chuckle moved through the crowd. My path diverged from family expectations, but ultimately expanded rather than rejected our legacy. The tension between tradition and innovation created something stronger than either could have accomplished, alone. I hadn't planned to make such a personal acknowledgement, but the words felt right in the moment. My father's slight nod confirmed the appropriateness of publicly recognizing our complex journey. I accept this award on behalf of the entire Verdant Future team and all the sustainable businesses we've been privileged to serve. Together, we're demonstrating that the most successful enterprises of the future will be those that generate multiple forms of value. Financial returns, yes, but also environmental regeneration and social benefit. Thank you. The applause as I returned to my seat seemed to carry a different quality than when I'd approached the stage. Less polite recognition, more genuine appreciation. My mother squeezed my hand as I sat down, whispering, "Beautifully said, darling," while Kate pressed a discreet kiss to my shoulder. What struck me most powerfully, however, was my father's expression. The careful neutrality he typically maintained in public had given way to something more vulnerable. "Well done," he said simply, but the words carried the weight of a journey that had transformed us both. Later, at the reception that followed the ceremony, I found myself continuously interrupted by business leaders eager to discuss potential partnerships or investments. The award had elevated Verdant Future's profile even further, positioning us firmly within the business establishment I had once viewed with skepticism. "The sustainability darling of Seattle business royalty," Kate murmured teasingly as another CEO departed after pressing his card into my hand. "How does it feel to be the toast of the establishment you once rejected?" "Complicated," I admitted, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing server. I never wanted to reject the business community, I wanted to transform it, and that's happening, though more slowly than I'd like. "Transformation is never as fast as revolutionaries hope, nor as slow as traditionalists fear," she replied, her eyes tracking across the room to where my father stood in conversation with the mayor and several prominent executives. "Speaking of transformation, your father has been telling everyone at his table about Verdant Future's growth metrics." The observation startled me. "Really? That doesn't sound like him." "Oh, he couched it in very business-like terms, but he was definitely bragging, in his Richard Porter way." The thought warmed me unexpectedly. My father had come to respect Verdant Future's financial performance, but public pride was something else entirely. "Ms. Porter," a voice interrupted my reflection. "Congratulations on the well-deserved recognition." I turned to find Eleanor Chen, CEO of one of the region's largest investment firms and a longtime client of Porter Financial. Her presence at our table was unexpected. She typically gravitated toward more traditional business circles. "Thank you, Ms. Chen. I'm surprised but pleased to see you here." "I make a point of understanding emerging business trends," she replied, with the directness that had made her formidable in male-dominated finance. "Your company's approach to purpose-driven marketing has proven more durable than many expected." She glanced toward Kate, clearly expecting an introduction. "Forgive me. Eleanor Chen, this is Kate Winters, Executive Director of the Willamette River Conservation Alliance and my partner." If the personal detail surprised Eleanor, she didn't show it. "The River Restoration Project. Impressive results with the salmon habitat recovery. I sit on the board of Northwest Heritage Foundation. We should discuss potential funding synergies." The conversation shifted into the familiar territory of professional networking, though with an unusual bridging of traditional finance and environmental conservation. As Eleanor departed with promises of future meetings, Kate raised an eyebrow. Did Eleanor Chen just offer to help fund river conservation? The same Eleanor Chen who was quoted last year saying environmental regulations were strangling economic growth? "People evolve," I said, thinking of my own family's journey. Sometimes they just need to see viability demonstrated before they can embrace new approaches. The evening continued with more congratulations, conversations, and connections formed across previously separate business circles. I was discussing regenerative agriculture investments with a venture capitalist when I noticed Emily, Nathan's daughter, now 17 and increasingly outspoken on environmental issues, deep in conversation with my father and several other executives. "Excuse me," I said to the investor, curiosity drawing me toward the unexpected grouping. As I approached, I caught the thread of Emily's passionate explanation. Carbon sequestration potential is significant, but the business model requires rethinking traditional ROI timeframes. When you factor in ecosystem services and climate resilience, my father noticed me first, a hint of amusement softening his expression. "Olivia, Your niece is giving us quite the education on regenerative investment models. She seems to have inherited your talent for challenging conventional thinking." Emily grinned, unapologetic. I was explaining why 3-year return horizons don't work for some sustainability investments. They're acting like quarterly profits are some law of physics instead of a cultural construct. The executives, all men over 50 in nearly identical dark suits, seemed caught between discomfort and fascination at being lectured by a teenager. I recognized the expression from countless meetings where I'd challenged similar assumptions. "Perhaps this conversation would benefit from more perspective," I suggested diplomatically. "Emily, why don't you join the panel I'm hosting next month on next-generation investment approaches? These gentlemen might appreciate hearing your ideas in a more structured format." The suggestion satisfied both Emily's desire to be taken seriously and the executive's need to exit the impromptu seminar without dismissing her outright. As the group dispersed, my father lingered, watching Emily rejoin her parents across the room. "She reminds me of you at that age," he observed. "The same conviction that the world should, be different. I recall you finding that quality less charming in me than you seem to in her," I noted, keeping my tone light despite the weight of the observation. He considered this, swirling the remainder of his scotch in its crystal tumbler. "Perhaps I've learned something in the interim." After a pause, he added, "Your speech was impressive, particularly the unscripted portions." "Thank you. I meant what I said about the family legacy. I know." His gaze drifted across the room, taking in the gathering of Seattle's business elite. "This world is changing faster than many of us anticipated. Those who can't adapt will be left behind." Coming from my father, who had built his career on traditional investment approaches and cautious corporate strategy, the acknowledgement was significant. Before I could respond, we were interrupted by the event photographer requesting a family photo, gathering the Porters together beneath the sparkling chandeliers. As we assembled, my parents at the center, Nathan and Jennifer with Emily, Megan and Thomas, Kate and me, I was struck by how different this grouping appeared from family photos of the past. More diverse in both appearance and thinking, yet unmistakably connected. The Porter family had expanded its definition of success, of acceptable paths, of what constituted value. "Smile for Seattle Business Monthly," the photographer instructed, raising his camera. In that frozen moment, caught between inhalation and the camera's click, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. From family ridicule to public celebration, from rejection to collaboration, from painful confrontation to genuine, if sometimes uneasy, acceptance. The flash captured us as we were now. Not a dynasty united by uniform thinking, but a family strengthened by its diversity of approaches, all oriented toward creating value in different but complementary ways. The photograph would show the Porters as they had become, not as tradition had once insisted they must remain. Later that night, after the award ceremony had concluded and we had returned to my parents' Seattle home for a nightcap, I found myself alone with my father in his study. The familiar space had changed subtly over the years. Certificates recognizing Porter Financial's sustainable investment initiatives now hung alongside the more traditional accolades, and several books on environmental economics had appeared on his shelves. "Your mother insisted we open this," he said, producing a bottle of rare champagne we had discovered during a family trip to France when I was a teenager. "She's been saving it for a special occasion." "And my award qualifies?" I asked, genuinely curious. For years, my parents had celebrated Nathan's career milestones lavishly, while acknowledging my achievements with more restrained enthusiasm. The Entrepreneur of the Year is significant recognition. He poured 2 glasses with practiced precision. Though honestly, I believe she's been looking for any excuse to open this bottle since Megan and Thomas announced they're expecting. The reminder of my sister's pregnancy, now in its 5th month with the nursery being designed according to stringent ecological standards, brought a smile. The next generation of Porters would arrive into a family very different from the one I had grown up in. A toast, my father said, raising his glass, to the evolution of the Porter legacy. The choice of words, so closely mirroring my own thoughts earlier, caught me by surprise. We clinked glasses, the fine crystal producing a perfect resonant note. "I've been meaning to discuss something with you," he continued, setting his glass down and adopting the more formal posture I recognized from business conversations. "The board is restructuring Porter Financial's leadership model, creating separate divisions with greater autonomy, each with its own president reporting to the CEO." I nodded, familiar with the reorganization through my involvement with the sustainability division. "Nathan mentioned it last month. Seems like a sensible adaptation to the firm's growth." "Indeed." My father studied me carefully. "The Sustainable Investment Division will become its own entity with expanded scope and resources. The board is unanimous in their recommendation for who should lead it." It took me a moment to register his meaning. "You want me to head the division?" "Dad, I already run Verdant Future. I can't take on—" "Not as an employee," he clarified. "As a partner. A formalized collaboration between Verdant Future and Porter Financial, with you leading the combined sustainable investment and marketing strategy. You would maintain your independence while integrating more fully with our operations." The proposal was unexpected, though perhaps it shouldn't have been. The past 5 years had seen increasing collaboration between our businesses, with clients, moving seamlessly between Verdant Future's marketing services and Porter Financial's investment products. "That would be a significant restructuring of both organizations," I said carefully. "What does Nathan think?" It was his idea, actually. My father's admission carried a hint of amusement at my surprised expression. "He's been analyzing the performance metrics of our joint ventures. The data is compelling. Clients who utilize both firms' services generate 38% higher returns and demonstrate stronger brand loyalty." Nathan, once the most vocal critic of my eco-fantasy, now advocating for deeper integration between our businesses. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'd need to maintain Verdant Future's separate identity," I said, thinking aloud. "Our brand stands for something distinct in the marketplace." "Of course. This isn't an acquisition or merger. It's a strategic alliance with shared leadership. Your company remains independent while gaining access to Porter Financial's resources and client base." The proposal was elegant in its structure, offering the benefits of integration without requiring me to sacrifice the autonomy I had fought so hard to establish. 5 years ago, such an arrangement would have seemed impossible, not just practically, but psychologically. The gulf between our business philosophies had appeared unbridgeable. "I'll need to discuss it with my team," I said finally. "And with Kate. This would impact our personal lives as well, potentially requiring more time in Seattle." My father nodded, accepting the reasonable caution. "Take the time you need. The board isn't presenting the reorganization until next quarter." He hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think this approach combines the best of both our perspectives. The financial acumen of Porter tradition with the innovation and purpose Verdant Future represents. The acknowledgement that my approach had value worth integrating into the family business, not just as a siloed initiative, but as a core strategic direction, represented the culmination of a journey that had begun with dismissal and ridicule. 5 years ago, you laughed when I said I was starting my own business," I observed, not accusingly, but as a simple statement of fact. "Now you're proposing that business help lead a key division of Porter Financial." My father was quiet for a moment, contemplating his champagne. When he spoke, his voice carried an unusual quality of reflection. "I've been in business for over 40 years, Olivia. Built Porter Financial from a regional firm to a national presence. I thought I understood. What drove market success?" He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. What I failed to recognize was how fundamentally the landscape was shifting. "You saw it before I did, before most of us did." The admission, so straightforward, so lacking in his usual qualifications, left me momentarily speechless. It wasn't just market insight, he continued. It was courage, the willingness to risk failure for something you believed in. I've built my career on calculated risk, but what you did, investing your savings in an unproven concept, standing your ground when everyone, including your family, dismissed it, that required a different kind of courage. I was terrified. I admitted. The confession easier now that success had vindicated the risk. Those first few months, I would wake up in the middle of the night convinced I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Yet you persisted. There was genuine curiosity in his voice. Why? What gave you that certainty when all the traditional metrics suggested failure? I considered the question, realizing he was asking not as the patriarch or the successful financier, but as someone genuinely seeking to understand a perspective different from his own. It wasn't certainty, I said finally. It was purpose. I believed the work mattered, regardless of whether it succeeded by conventional measures. That made the risk worthwhile, even if I failed. Purpose over profit, he mused, echoing a phrase I'd used in countless presentations and interviews. I always saw that as naive idealism. What I've come to realize is that purpose drives profit in ways traditional models fail to capture. The most successful businesses of the next generation will be those that align financial returns with meaningful impact. He was quoting me almost verbatim, though I doubted he realized it. Words from the speech I'd given when launching the Portland office 3 years earlier. The fact that Richard Porter, paragon of traditional finance, now spoke this language as his own represented a shift I had never anticipated. If we move forward with this partnership, I said, bringing the conversation back to the proposal at tea. There would need to be clear agreements about autonomy and decision-making. Verdant Future's values can't be compromised. Understood. He nodded, shifting seamlessly into negotiation mode. We can establish governance structures that protect both organizations' integrity while maximizing collaborative potential. I've asked legal to draft preliminary terms for your review. The conversation continued in this vein, discussing practicalities and potential structures for the partnership. As we spoke, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us to this point. Not just my path from corporate marketer to sustainable business entrepreneur, but my father's evolution from skeptic to advocate, from dismissing my vision to proposing its integration into the heart of the family enterprise. Later that night, as Kate and I prepared for bed in the guest room that had once been my childhood bedroom, I shared the details of my father's proposal. A formal partnership, she mused, removing her earrings at the antique vanity that had belonged to my grandmother. That's a significant shift from eco-fantasy to strategic asset. The market performance made the case more effectively than any argument could have, I acknowledged, thinking of the quarterly reports that had gradually transformed skepticism into interest and eventually into respect. Sustainable businesses have outperformed traditional models consistently enough that even the most conservative investors can't ignore the trend. It's more than market performance, Kate countered, turning to face me. It's your father recognizing that different approaches to business can coexist, even strengthen each other. That's a personal evolution as much as a professional one. She was right, of course. The proposed partnership represented not just a business arrangement, but the culmination of a family journey. From rejection to grudging acceptance to genuine integration of divergent perspectives. "What will you do?" she asked, settling beside me on the edge of the bed. "Will you accept the partnership?" "I'm not sure yet. There are practical considerations. How it would affect Verdant Future's brand, our team's autonomy, our life in Portland." I paused, considering. But beyond the logistics, there's something meaningful about bringing these two worlds together formally. Not erasing their differences, but creating something stronger through their collaboration. Kate nodded thoughtfully. A bit like what we've been discussing for our own family. Different backgrounds, perspectives, approaches. but aligned in core values and stronger together than separate. The parallel wasn't lost on me. Over the past year, we had been exploring the possibility of starting a family, researching adoption, options, considering what kind of parents we wanted to be, imagining how we might integrate our different backgrounds and values into a cohesive family culture. The next generation of Porters will grow up with a different understanding of legacy, I observed, thinking of Megan's pregnancy and our own family plans. Not just financial success, but purpose and impact as core values. Your father's proposal is part of securing that legacy, Kate suggested, formalizing the integration of sustainability into the family business so it outlasts any individual champion. The observation resonated deeply. Beyond the business implications, my father's proposal represented an institutionalization of the values I had fought to establish, ensuring they would become part of the Porter legacy rather than remain a separate, potentially temporary deviation. "I'll need to think about it carefully," I said, though I could feel myself leaning toward acceptance. "Discuss it with the team, review the terms, consider all the implications." Kate smiled, recognizing my methodical approach to major decisions. "Of course you will. That's why your business has succeeded. You're thorough, thoughtful, and principled in your choices." As we prepared for sleep in the quiet of my childhood home, I found myself reflecting on the remarkable journey of the past 5 years. From the family ridicule that had greeted my business plan to the award ceremony celebrating its success, from painful rejection to proposed partnership, from isolation to integration. The Porter family had changed, not just in its business approach, but in its fundamental understanding of success, legacy, and purpose. My path, once dismissed as naive idealism, had become a valued component of the family enterprise, not through capitulation or compromise, but through performance that demanded respect on its own terms. 5 years ago, my family had laughed when I said I'd start my own business. Now they weren't just asking for loans, they were proposing partnership, integration, and a reimagined legacy that incorporated the very values they had once dismissed. The evolution hadn't been easy or straightforward. It had required confrontation, perseverance, and the courage to stand firm when it would have been easier to conform. But the result was something none of us could have created alone. A family enterprise strengthened by diverse perspectives. A legacy expanded to embrace both profit and purpose. As I drifted toward sleep in the room where I had once dreamed of escaping family expectations, I found myself instead contemplating how to more deeply integrate my path with the Porter legacy, not through surrender, but through transformation. The journey had come full circle, though we had all arrived somewhere none of us had anticipated when it began. Tomorrow would bring practical considerations, negotiations, and careful analysis of the partnership proposal. But tonight, I simply appreciated the distance we had traveled, from ridicule to respect, from rejection to recognition, from separation to integration. The Porter legacy continued to evolve, and I had helped shape that evolution in ways I once thought impossible. In the morning, Emily cornered me in the kitchen before the rest of the family had descended for breakfast. Still in her pajamas but fully alert, she brandished her phone with its latest financial news alerts. "Aunt Olivia, have you seen this? The SEC is proposing new climate risk disclosure requirements for public companies. This could fundamentally change how sustainability is valued in the market." Her excitement was infectious. Her understanding of the implications impressive for someone not yet in college. As we discussed the potential impact over coffee, I saw in her the next evolution of the Porter approach to business, combining her father's financial acumen with environmental values that had once been considered antithetical to the family's. Business orientation. "I've been thinking about my college applications," she continued, pouring a second cup. "Finance major with environmental science minor or the reverse? What do you think would better position me for the future of sustainable investing?" The question, so naturally assuming the integration of fields once considered separate, illustrated how profoundly perspectives had shifted. For Emily's generation, the divide between profit and purpose that had defined my early career battle seemed increasingly artificial and outdated. Either could work, I offered, but the ability to translate between different value systems and vocabularies, that's where the real opportunity lies. Understanding both the financial metrics and the environmental science deeply enough to create integrated solutions. She nodded thoughtfully. That's what you did with Verdant Future, right? Created a bridge between traditional business goals and sustainability values? Exactly. And now, I hesitated, then decided to share the development. Your grandfather has proposed a formal partnership between Porter Financial and Verdant Future, a strategic alliance to lead the firm's expanded sustainability division. Emily's eyes widened. Seriously? Grandpa wants to integrate your business approach directly into Porter Financial? That's... wow. She shook her head slightly. I remember when he used to call your clients tree huggers with business cards. The characterization was accurate, if less harsh than some of his other dismissals from the early days. People evolve when presented with compelling evidence, I said, especially when that evidence affects their bottom line. The bottom line, Emily repeated thoughtfully. You know, I've been reading about expanded definitions of return on investment, frameworks that incorporate social and environmental impacts alongside financial returns. Even traditional analysts are starting to recognize these approaches have validity. As she outlined the latest research on integrated valuation models, I found myself smiling at the passion and sophistication of her analysis. The next generation of porters would not need to fight the battles I had waged, not because those battles were unnecessary, but because they had created space for new conversations, new approaches, new definitions of success. The journey wasn't complete. Full integration of sustainability into mainstream business practice remained an ongoing challenge, but the trajectory was clear and increasingly irreversible. What had once been dismissed as a youthful eco-fantasy had proven its validity, not just ethically but financially, transforming both my family's business and our understanding of legacy in the process. 5 years after that painful family dinner when laughter had greeted my business plan, I stood at the threshold of a new chapter, not just for Verdant Future, but for the Porter family enterprise as a whole. The path forward would bring new challenges, requiring the same courage and conviction that had launched me on this journey. But I would face those challenges not in isolation, but in partnership with the very family that had once dismissed my vision. The transformation from ridicule to respect, from rejection to integration, represented something more profound than business success. It demonstrated the power of staying true to one's values even when conventional wisdom predicted failure. It proved that meaningful change was possible, even in systems that appeared resistant to evolution. My family had laughed when I said I'd start my own business. Now they weren't just asking for loans, they were rebuilding their legacy around the very principles they had once dismissed, creating something neither of us could have imagined when the journey began. 7 years after founding Verdant Future, the view from my corner office still took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Portland's ever-changing skyline, with Mount Hood visible in the distance on clear days. The Willamette River sparkled below, its health notably improved thanks to conservation efforts Kate had spearheaded. The office itself reflected our evolution, no longer a scrappy startup with second-hand furniture, but the headquarters of what business magazines now called the premier sustainability-focused marketing and consulting firm in the Northwest. I turned from the view to the more immediate landscape of my desk, quarterly reports, partnership agreements, and a framed magazine cover featuring Verdant Future in its Companies Reshaping American Business issue. Beside it sat a more personal milestone, a photograph of Kate and me with our son James on his 2nd birthday 3 months ago. His serious expression so resembled my father's that it had become a family joke. though his fierce environmentalism at age 2, insisting on rescuing earthworms from sidewalks after rain, was purely Kate's influence. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Your father's here for the meeting. Should I send him in?" "Yes, thank you." I straightened my blazer and cleared space on the conference table, a handcrafted piece made from reclaimed timber sourced through Thomas's Sustainable Forestry Initiative. My father entered with the purposeful stride that had intimidated countless business associates over his 40-year career. At 67, he showed no interest in traditional retirement, though he had gradually shifted day-to-day operations of Porter Financial to Nathan while maintaining his role as chairman. The formal partnership between our companies had transformed both organizations over the past 2 years, creating what industry analysts now referred to as the Porter model of integrated financial and sustainability services. "Traffic from the airport was reasonable," he said by way of greeting, setting his briefcase on the table. Despite our improved relationship, my father still approached personal exchanges with business-like efficiency. "Nathan sends his regards. He's finalizing the Tokyo expansion and couldn't get away." "How's Jennifer handling the prospect of relocating?" I asked, pouring coffee into the ceramic mugs handmade by a local artisan. The kind of detail that would have seemed frivolous to my father 7 years ago, but that he now recognized as part of our brand identity. Surprisingly well. Emily's decision to attend university in Japan next year made the timing convenient. Jennifer's already researching sustainable architecture firms in Tokyo for potential collaborations. The casual mention of sustainability as a family priority still occasionally caught me off guard. What had once been my isolated passion had become integrated into the Porter family's approach to everything from business investments to personal choices. I received the prospectus. "For the Regenerative Agriculture Fund," I said, shifting to the purpose of our meeting. "The integration of social impact metrics with traditional financial projections is impressive. Your team has come a long way in valuing multiple forms of capital. Your influence." He accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks, though I still pushed back on the return timeline. 7 years to profitability stretches investor expectations, even with the tax advantages. The pilot project in eastern Washington demonstrated accelerated soil restoration timelines. We've updated the projections accordingly. I pulled the revised models from my folder. The carbon sequestration metrics alone make the case for institutional investors with climate commitments. We spent the next hour reviewing the fund structure, marketing approach, and client targeting strategy. The easy collaboration between us, financial acumen blending with sustainability expertise, traditional investment knowledge enhancing innovative approaches rather than opposing them, still occasionally struck me as miraculous given our starting point. "The partnership has exceeded projections," my father observed, reviewing the quarterly numbers. 4 consecutive quarters of 30% growth, client retention at 92%. The board is extremely pleased. Coming from Richard Porter, this constituted effusive praise. "The integrated model offers something unique in the marketplace," I acknowledged. "Clients appreciate the seamless connection between their sustainability goals and financial strategies." "It's more than market differentiation," he said, surprising me with a departure from his usual focus on metrics. "It's integrity, alignment, between stated values and actual operations. Clients recognize authenticity, even if they wouldn't articulate it that way." The observation, so aligned with principles I had advocated for years, illustrated how profoundly his perspective had evolved. 7 years ago, he had dismissed such concepts as idealistic distractions from financial fundamentals. Now he spoke of authenticity and values alignment as business drivers, without a trace of irony. "The Vancouver office reports similar feedback," I noted, "particularly from younger clients. They're specifically seeking out our integrated approach." He nodded, making a note in his leather portfolio. "Which brings me to the succession planning discussion. The board meeting next month will address leadership transition strategies for both organizations. The topic sent a flutter of surprise through me. Transition? You're not actually considering retirement, are you? A slight smile crossed his face. Not immediately. But responsible governance requires forward planning. You and Nathan have demonstrated the ability to lead your respective organizations while maintaining the collaborative model. The board wants to formalize the next generation of leadership. The implication was clear. My father was positioning Nathan and me as the future joint leaders of the Porter business ecosystem, maintaining the separate identities of our companies while strengthening their strategic alignment. It represented the culmination of a journey neither of us could have imagined 7 years earlier. "I'll need to discuss this with my leadership team," I said, thinking particularly of Marco, whose evolution from first employee to chief innovation officer had been integral to our success. Any formal succession plan would need to respect Verdant Future's organizational culture. Of course. He closed his portfolio with a decisive snap. The proposal isn't consolidation, but continued evolution of the partnership model. Your independence remains essential to the value proposition. The acknowledgement that Verdant Future's distinct approach was not merely tolerated, but valued as a strategic asset, represented perhaps the most profound shift in our relationship. My father now recognized that the very qualities he had once dismissed as impractical idealism constituted a competitive advantage in a changing marketplace. Our business discussion concluded, we moved toward the personal updates that now formed a regular part of our interactions. These conversations remained somewhat formal compared to my exchanges with my mother or siblings, but the mere fact of their existence marked significant progress. Your mother mentioned James has developed strong opinions about oceanic conservation. His tone held genuine curiosity mixed with amusement. Something about refusing fish sticks because of fishing practices? I laughed, remembering James's earnest declaration at dinner the previous week. Kate took him to the aquarium's new ocean health exhibit. He absorbed more than we expected and has appointed himself personal guardian of marine biodiversity. At 2.5? My father shook his head slightly, though his expression held pride rather than dismissal. The next generation of porters appears to be accelerating the timeline for environmental awareness. He comes by it honestly, between Kate's conservation work and the family business focus. I hesitated, then added, "We're considering adoption for our second child, starting the process this fall." The personal disclosure felt significant. Sharing family planning decisions with my father would have been unimaginable in the days when our relationship revolved exclusively around business, expectations, and disappointments. "Your mother will be thrilled," he said after a momentary pause. "She's been hinting about wanting another grandchild to spoil, particularly since Megan's twins are already in preschool." The conversation shifted to upcoming family events. Megan and Thomas's renovation of a historic property using exclusively sustainable materials. Nathan's daughter Emily's research project on regenerative economics in Japan. My mother's surprisingly passionate embrace of plastic-free living. The ease with which sustainability principles now infused these discussions still occasionally surprised me, given how hard I had once fought to have such perspectives acknowledged at all. As our meeting concluded and my father prepared to leave, for his next appointment he paused at the door, his expression uncharacteristically reflective. "I was speaking with Robert Chen at the investment forum last week," he said, referencing a longtime business associate. His daughter just quit her banking position to start a social impact venture. He was expressing concerns about her financial security, career trajectory, the usual parental worries. I waited, sensing there was more to this seemingly casual observation. "I found myself telling him about your journey," my father continued. "How what appeared initially as a risky deviation ultimately strengthened not just your own professional standing, but the family enterprise as a whole." He adjusted his cuffs, a habitual gesture when venturing into more personal territory. I told him sometimes children see market shifts before their parents do, particularly when those shifts involve evolving values. That fighting their insights might feel like protection, but actually limits potential. The anecdote rendered me momentarily speechless. My father, who had once laughed outright at my business plan and predicted imminent failure, was now advising other parents to trust their children's entrepreneurial instincts, particularly regarding sustainability and social impact. That's quite an evolution in perspective, I managed finally. 7 years of compelling evidence tends to influence one's outlook, he replied with the hint of dry humor that occasionally surfaced in our interactions now. The Porter Sustainable Future Fund outperforming traditional portfolios for 20 consecutive quarters makes a persuasive case. But we both knew it was more than performance metrics that had transformed his view. It was the lived experience of watching a different approach succeed on its own terms, of seeing values he had dismissed as impractical idealism demonstrate tangible market value, of recognizing that the legacy he had worked to build could be strengthened rather than diminished by evolution. After he departed for his next meeting, I found myself standing again at the window, watching Portland's distinctive blend of urban energy and natural beauty. 7 years earlier, operating from a tiny office with more plants than clients, I could not have imagined the journey ahead. Not just the business success, but the transformation of family relationships, the integration of once competing value systems, the creation of a legacy that honored tradition while embracing innovation. My phone buzzed with a text from Kate. Reminder, James's playdate with Megan's twins at 4 p.m. I'll meet you there. Bring extra clothes. Thomas is showing them the rainwater collection system, and mud will definitely be involved. I smiled, imagining the scene. My conservation-focused partner, my sustainable design specialist sister, her reclaimed timber expert husband, and our collectively mud-covered children exploring environmental systems together. A family configuration none of us could have predicted 7 years ago, when sustainability was my isolated passion rather than a shared family value. Another text arrived, this one from Nathan. Tokyo expansion approved unanimously by the board. Emily's university connections already yielding potential client introductions. When can you visit to consult on marketing strategy? The Porter business ecosystem continued to expand globally, with each family member contributing distinct expertise while maintaining a shared commitment to integrated value creation. What had begun as my solitary deviation from family expectations had evolved into a collaborative reimagining of the Porter legacy itself. A final message appeared, this one from my mother. Lunch tomorrow? Found the perfect sustainable toy store for James's birthday. Also want your opinion on impact investing options for the family foundation. Your father mentioned you've developed a new assessment framework. I confirmed our lunch plans, still occasionally struck by how naturally my mother now incorporated sustainability considerations into both personal and financial decisions. The evolution hadn't happened overnight. There had been uncomfortable conversations, persistent misconceptions, and occasional retreats to more familiar territory. But gradually, steadily, the entire family had expanded its definition of value, success, and legacy. My assistant knocked gently before entering. The leadership team is assembled for the quarterly vision session. Also, that sustainable fashion startup you mentored just won the Innovation Award. Their CEO sent champagne. She gestured toward an elegantly packaged bottle with a handwritten note. Shall I have it chilled for the celebration later? Perfect, thank you. I gathered my materials for the meeting, including the leadership. Transition discussion I would now need to introduce based on my father's succession planning proposal. As I walked toward our conference room, passing walls adorned with client success stories and sustainability impact metrics, I reflected on the distance traveled since that family dinner when laughter had greeted my business announcement. 7 years of persistence, innovation, and gradually demonstrated value had transformed ridicule into respect, skepticism into partnership, and isolation into integration. My family had laughed when I said I'd start my own business. Now they weren't just asking for loans, they were building a shared legacy around the very principles they had once dismissed. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward, but its challenges had created something none of us could have achieved alone. A family enterprise that honored its financial traditions while embracing broader definitions of value and success. The Porter name now represented not just financial acumen, but integrated value creation, a legacy that future generations could adapt and expand rather than merely inherit. As I entered the conference room filled with the talented team that had helped build this reality, I carried the quiet satisfaction of having stayed true to my vision, even when convention predicted failure, and having ultimately transformed not just my own path, but my family's understanding of success itself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.